I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Game Time. And today, I am joined by very good friend of the show, and you know his name, but I should definitely have the graphic up. Anyway, it's Evan Lazar of Patriots.com. Taylor in the host chair, which is not normal, as you know, and I will do my best. But there it is. We got a mailbag episode for you today, y'all, breaking down what you want to know a couple weeks out of the NFL draft. Patriots, plenty of holes to fill, even after a pretty good free agency period, considering how tough it is for a team in the Patriots position to sign some of the more marquee names and acquire some of the more marquee talent. But before we get into it, Evan, let me check in with you, buddy. How are you doing? Very, very busy season. I see you churning out the great content at pats.com. So how you doing mentally, spiritually, all that good stuff?
I'm doing great. I can't complain. Love this time of year. I think we're all dragging our feet here to the finish line a little bit just because how long we've been talking about this draft class. So hopefully in future years with Mike Vrabel in charge now, we won't have to talk about the draft for as long as we have these last couple of years. But I'm definitely excited about this class. And I think that it gets a little bit of a bad rap in some ways. And I also think that it's a great class for the Patriots in a lot of ways too.
And what's your perspective on the class? Because I know you quote tweeted our buddy Ben Solak saying it's not really a star draft, but it's a starter draft. And for a team like the Patriots, if you get a pretty good starter pack, I think you're in decent shape, considering this is not a team that a lot of people are expecting to make any kind of playoff push. So how do you see this draft? Both the top of it, obviously, because it's not the same as other classes, but then talk about some of the depth beyond as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's the main key to understanding this draft. And I know a lot of people are probably sick of hearing it by now because we've all kind of been banging this drum, but this is not a star draft. It's not a draft at the top where you have 7, 8 blue chip guys like a year like last year where there's 3 different quarterbacks and 3 different receivers and a franchise left tackle and a franchise tight end. Like that's not the class that we're in. And you can't pick from that class. Unfortunately, we can't put Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt into this class and take those players. But what I do think you can do in this class is if you read the board correctly and you identify the right positions that have depth, you can get starters into day 3 of this draft at, let's say, running back or on the defensive line or the interior offensive line, maybe tight end as well, and wide receiver even too. So I look at those positions as the strength of the draft right now in terms of depth, and you might not get that coveted number 1 wide receiver on day 2 of this group, but you might get a really good number 2 receiver that down the line can pair with that top dog. So I actually have come away from my research of this draft pretty optimistic about what the Patriots can do.
I feel the same way. All the really glaring positions of need, like you said, there's not going to be a whole lot of studs, but you're still going to get some quality players on the roster that the Patriots haven't had in so long. You kind of forget, oh yeah, when you're at least average across the board and you have a good quarterback, the product doesn't have to be as bad as it's been lately. But we haven't had you on the show for quite a while, especially since Vrabel era actually got started. So I want to know, obviously very, very early on, but what are your impressions of the new culture in the building? Because you're actually there, and from everything we've heard, vibes are pretty high inside the walls of One Patriot Place. So how do you feel about, one, the energy and everything he's brought into the building just as his own galvanizing presence, but also what he's done in terms of both additions and subtractions?
Yeah, I think it's been great so far. And look, I'm not going to speak too much to the vibe in the football wing of the building because they don't invite me there too often. But in terms of what it looks like from the down the hall looking in, it's been optimistic and it's been exciting that they've been able to go out and accomplish some things in free agency, which they weren't frankly able to do last year. And I do think having Vrabel at the helm is a piece of that. I think he is a draw, at least having somebody that's established and somebody that has a reputation of building a winning program in Tennessee. You are a little bit more of a draw along with the money to bring in a guy like Milton Williams, to bring in a Stephon Diggs, to bring in players that can make an impact and that can help. And I think for the most part, you feel that. And the other thing I would just say with Vrabel, right off the bat, from our introductory press conference with him, and then also just with our sit down with him on Patriots Unfiltered back in January. This is a guy that's got an answer for everything. Like, he's got a vision and he's got a plan for so many different avenues of the organization that go even maybe some people say beyond football, but I think it's all connected, on and off the field. And it's cool to have somebody that you can literally ask a question about, what kind of scheme are you guys going to run in this instance or that instance, but you can also ask them about things like how players handle social media and how you handle the outside noise in general. And he has an answer and a plan and a vision for all of it, which has been certainly refreshing.
It's so nice that he kind of combines the elements of what Gerard Mayo was trying to do in terms of being a little bit better on the personable side. And then also Bill Belichick, where it's like, I don't got to be the nicest guy in the world because I'm so well prepared and I have such a wealth of knowledge. And you get that, like in the introductory presser, when Vrabel's talking about, we're going to have RPOs and all that, dude, my jaw almost dropped. I'm like, wait a minute, we're allowed to say RPO out loud like it's not a sin or a bad word or anything like that. So obviously very exciting start, but they have a long way to go. So without further ado, brother, let's dive into some of these mailbag questions. What is one trade you'd like to see the Patriots make during draft weekend, whether it's for picks or a player? Anyone on the current roster who you think could be dealt?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it, obviously everything depends on what they do at the top. There's an order of operations to all of this. And if they end up drafting, let's say, Will Campbell, then obviously the trade back into the first round for Ariante Ursary or Josh Connerly is not necessarily a need or something that they would do as quickly. But I think that trade, looking at 38, and I know we've heard rumblings that they tried to pull this off last year and were unable to do so. But that ability to maybe use, their extra mid-round picks or something along those lines to get back into the end of the first round and maybe make 2 first-round picks coming up from 38, whether it's tackle then receiver or receiver then tackle or edge then tackle or whatever combination you want to go with. I think there's going to be some interesting players in the 20s, early 30s that they might need to jump some teams to get to, but would be exciting. Those receivers, Ibuka, Golden, Luther Burden, Tet McMillan, if he falls on draft night. Like those guys, I look at that and say, wow, if you can come out of this draft with Will Campbell and Matthew Golden and Tet McMillan, I mean, you're really cooking, on the first night. So I would love to see that kind of trade.
So for a guy like a Josh Simmons, because I've been thinking about him, the mock drafts have taken him from being somebody who was really in like the 20s. Now he's getting projected to go to the Chiefs at 31. Obviously, we don't know when he's going to be back on the field. So there's a bit of not even projection, but we just don't know. Is he someone you consider trading up for, though? Like, there have been some rumblings about, off the field stuff. Maybe Ohio State wasn't too sad to see him leaving the program necessarily. But when you turn on the tape, this is clearly the most talented left tackle prospect in this draft. And there's not a whole lot of holes to poke in his tape, but the health issues and the off-field issues kind of ring a bell. So would you still take the chance knowing you got Mike Vrabel, a guy who can connect with players on a different level? Or do you think this is the kind of class where you say, we want, former captains, we want, the guys who are talented, obviously, but could also come to the organization and potentially be young leaders in their rooms?
Yeah, it's a good question because I have sort of felt like I would trust Vrabel in a lot of these scenarios, whether it's a Josh Simmons or a Luther Burden is another example of somebody that doesn't necessarily have these glaring off the field concerns, but they have maybe some, motivational tactics are needed to get those guys locked in and on the tracks and buying into the program. And you can't have an entire team of Boy Scouts. At some point you have to take on some risk about character and things like that. So after the free agency that they had, where they were able to go out and add some character guys and some culture guys that can be leaders. I would love to see Vrabel trust in himself that, all right, I'll get Luther Burden on the program. I'm not going to be concerned about all of this all the time. We'll get him here. We'll get him practicing Monday through Saturday and get him locked into the game plan so that he can play on Sunday, to a lesser extent. But you also hear, some of the same rumblings with Abdul Carter. I would just trust Vrabel to get the most out of those guys. And I would say the same thing about Josh Simmons. Now, the injury with Josh Simmons scares me more than some of the character stuff. I just think if you're the Patriots, you're in a position where you need your rookies and your early round draft picks to play. And if there's any risk that Josh Simmons is going to be a totally redshirted rookie season where he's a complete lost cause for year one because of the injury, then I don't love the idea of stashing players that early as a rebuilding team like New England. Like if you're the Chiefs or the Niners or the Eagles or, the Commanders or like one of these teams that is knocking on the door of championships right now, then you can take on some of that risk, the Patriots 10 years ago. But I don't know if the Patriots are in that same boat right now.
Absolutely, brother. And somebody brought up Ted McMillan. I was going to ask this later, but I'm bringing it up now. With the talk of Ted possibly falling, would you trade up for him? And would you value him enough to trade future picks up to the teens or into the 20s? Now, I'll say I don't think Ted's falling that much. I think there was some of the hype when he didn't run the 40, and it's, oh, God, like this guy's running in the 4.7s. He's basically a guard. We can't draft him, but I think some of that's quieted down, and I feel like he's still, at worst, a top 15 player. But do you see it a different way, and how much would you value him?
Yeah, he's my 10th rated player in the draft. Like, I think he's getting a little bit of a bad rap too, just like to go back to that point. Is he Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze? Like, probably not. But I think Ted is a mid-first round pick all day long, maybe even earlier at the back end of the top 10. For a wide receiver needed team. I'm actually pretty surprised to hear about all the things that he's falling and all this kind of stuff. And like, to me, it screams that the league is still prioritizing some of the wrong things when it comes to like 40 times and things like that. Like when you turn on the film, is he going to run by people on the outside on the vertical plane? Like, not really. Like, that's not necessarily his game. There's going to be a lot of contested targets down the field on the outside for him if that's where he lives. But when you move him inside the formation, he can stretch the seams. He can get vertical on linebackers and safeties, and he's got great yards after the catch skill for his body type and for his size. So I look at him and see a guy that can still really succeed at a high level in the NFL. And I would be pretty surprised if he has like a huge drop to a point where the Patriots could trade up and get him. But, the receiver position, I think people have been wrong all over the place about that one, myself included, over the years. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if you got Evan Lazar singing the praises of a receiver who's not fast, he's pretty good. Like Ted, I remember early on, like is not the kind of guy who's usually your flavor. But when you watch the tape, it's like, no, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he is a good football player, and he's not so slow that you're really troubled by it. And I agree. I don't think he's going to be within the range where they could trade their second pick. And that's the one where typically I'd like to see them keep draft capital, or at least like maintain the same amount, just kind of moving up and down the board. I would not trade a future pick. I don't think I would do necessarily that much, especially if it was higher. But I mean, if this were even remotely possible in the 20s, I'd absolutely consider it. All right, this one's from Los. What would you say the Patriots' 5 biggest positions of need are, and in what order would you draft them? So we could just start left tackle and wide receiver, right? Yeah. I'm assuming those are the top 2. What order do you have them in?
I would say left tackle first. I just, the way I look at it, and I think they need top end talent at both positions. So don't get me wrong. If you have it the other way, totally fair. But the way I look at it is, if the Patriots had to play a game tomorrow, what would you feel better about putting on the field, their wide receiver group or their left tackle position? And I think it's definitely looking at it that way. You have to say left tackle is the bigger need. It just seems like that's really a spot where they might not have NFL caliber. And at receiver, you put Diggs, you put Kendrick Bourne, you put Pop Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, out there, Matt Collins. Like, at least you have some NFL players on the field at that spot. I'm not sure you do at left tackle right now. So I go left tackle, then receiver. I would say edge next. Like, I just think, the marriage between a need for a developmental guy that, can take over for Harold Landry or maybe full time in his second season. And then also, the strength of the class. Like, I think that position kind of marries up nicely. I would probably put running back next. Okay. I have some doubts about Antonio Gibson and Ramondre as sort of a duo right now, but I would also just mention again the strength of the class. Like, you're going to find a real explosive playmaker there at the running back position. And then the last one, probably interior offensive line, like whether you want to go center or guard there, left guard and center, I think are both spots where you could add some competition and some more talent.
What type of running back would you say their biggest need is? Is it going to be a guy who, if Ramondre's fumble issues persist, you can't really trust Antonio Gibson? All right, this is a guy where if we need to turn to him to be kind of our bell cow, we can do it. Or do you think they need more of a traditional Josh McDaniels third down back who not only is the versatile weapon as a receiver that you have in Gibson, but also someone who can be trusted in terms of pass protection?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and one that I've tried to rack my brain. Like when we were making our big boards, Deuce and I, we debated back and forth about this for days. Like what type of running back? Because there's so many running backs that when you try to project who they might actually draft, you kind of have to put them in buckets and try to guess which bucket they're going to go into. I personally look at speed and maybe some receiving upside at that spot. Maybe that's just because Mr. Kraft said that in the owners meetings that they are looking for speed at running back. So I've kind of gravitated or, latched onto that quote, but I just look at some of the guys in that speed mold. Dylan Sampson's one that I love, early, Trayvon Henderson, obviously from Ohio State's another earlier on in the draft. But, we've texted back and forth about a few of them, Woody Marks, Brashard Smith, LaQuint Allen might not be the fastest guy, but he's kind of got that receiving upside. So I look at those guys as maybe something, maybe Tootin from Virginia Tech too, like that they might be interested in on, 4th, 5th round, that type of range.
Maybe Scadaboo falls. You never know. With all the running backs in this class, he really could be a pretty decent value. Not the fastest guy in the world, but I just love how bouncy he is and the versatility there. If I had to go the 5 positions, left tackle, wide receiver, I totally agree. I think third, I actually would agree edge as well. I think it's tough between that and guard, but I do like Layden. I like what he could bring. And then Garrett Bradbury, I think is fine as a 1-year guy.
Yeah.
I just, Kayvon Chason, as much as I'm intrigued by how he finished last season, I don't know that I want him as one of the main guys on the edge, even if he is more of just a situational rusher. So I'd probably put edge third, then guard. I actually might put slot corner, honestly, at 5th. Because with Marcus Jones, one, he doesn't really fit what Vrabel typically has in the slot. Because he doesn't really take that slot corner off the field the way that Belichick would put a Duggar or a Peppers in that role. It's like, hey, be 5'10", 5'11", about 200 pounds and be able to take on the run. Yeah. Marcus can do all that, but there's the injuries. There's the fact that his contract's expiring. So both ways you slice it, I feel like they need to add some kind of depth, whether it's Elijah Huzzy, whether it's a Dorian Strong, whether it's a Jacob Parrish. I feel like there's enough options, and some of these guys even have return upside. So running back in corner, I feel like are just neck and neck at one of those spots, but obviously the trenches are really up there. And then wide receiver, you got to get some more help for Drake May. And let's get one more before a break. Who do you think the pick at 4 will be versus who do you want it to be? And this is a very smart question because I definitely have a different answer for both.
Yeah, I'll start with who I think it will be. Will Campbell. I just think looking at the board and what's going to happen in front of them, and then the need for tackle, and my whole take on it, because I know he's been a pretty divisive prospect throughout this entire process, but I just look at guys like Campbell in that next tier, taking Genty out of it, as the running back thing, it's kind of its own thing. But the next tier of players, Mason Graham, Tyler Warren, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, those guys I think are all pretty equal in terms of talent level. I have them graded out pretty similarly. And so you just look at Will Campbell, need at left tackle. Here's a left tackle that you feel like you can plug and play there. It just seems like it just marries up, and I wouldn't get too caught up. You hear a lot of, best player available. Well, I think we're splitting hairs trying to figure out who the best player available out of that group is. If you assume that, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are off the board, then I can make a case for any of those guys being the best player available. So I've just felt this entire time that the position of need kind of pushes him, above everybody else on the board. Who I want to be the pick is Travis Hunter. I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be available for the Patriots to draft, but I've been banging the drum for Travis Hunter wide receiver, from the beginning. I feel like he's one of the best wide receiver prospects that you just stack him up, over the last couple of years. I don't know where he would have fallen exactly last year for me, but probably wide receiver 3 or 4 in that class last year. So you look at Travis Hunter and just look at the general, instincts and natural feel for the game and space and finding big plays and the ball skills and the play speed. just an excellent receiver prospect that if you can get your hands on him, I think you've got some real firepower on offense. And I just want the Patriots, they might not get to, and that would be kind of a bummer, but I want them to prioritize special. Like they need special talent at the top of the draft this year. And I think that Travis Hunter is that.
I agree on both fronts. Travis Hunter's my guy. At first I didn't really want to let myself buy into the hype, but then I finally really dug into the tape, which is just the cardinal sin when you know a guy's not in your range. Like, why even get yourself excited? But then I was like, hell yeah, man. I don't really care where he plays. He's a whole lot of fun. And Will Campbell, I agree. I think that's probably going to be the pick. But just for the sake of being a little bit different, I'll go with different choices. So the guy that I think it'll be, if it's not Will Campbell, I think it's Jalen Walker. We talked about this. At first, I honestly did not get the hype because you saw the off-ball tape, but it's like, yeah, he does some good things, and I could see him growing into a quality off-ball linebacker, but he doesn't have enough experience, and you need to be like a crazy good linebacker to remotely warrant a top 5 pick. So I'm like, all right, yeah, but when he's on the line of scrimmage, I don't see a lot of really convincing wins where I'm super impressed. Go back to 2023 when he's playing some guys that were drafted last year are going to be drafted this year. And I'm like, okay, I get it. He's got a little bit of bend, some ghost. He's got some room to work. But even more than that, the tools are huge. And there's no real locks, right? At the number 4 pick, you don't have that home run guy. I would love for them to just get someone they think is going to reshape whatever room he goes into and is a potential future captain. Jalen Walker seems like he's going to be the Drake May of whatever defense he walks onto, where you look at that guy and you're like, oh, yes, he's literally going to change the franchise and be one of those pivotal kind of figures for you. In terms of who I want it to be, honestly, I've accepted Will Campbell, and I'm going to be happy with it because as much as I love Armand Membu, there is the projection of can he play left tackle? It's still going to be a transition. And this is a team that needs a starting caliber player. Even if Will Campbell's ceiling is very good, that's pretty damn good for a left tackle because you don't have a lot of very good left tackles in the draft. And I still do love the idea of potentially bringing in a kind of guy who can be a captain and a tone setter, especially on the offensive line, because it feels like they don't really have anybody like that. But how do you feel about Jalen Walker? Because we haven't really touched on him a whole lot yet.
Yeah, I have some concerns about the size, like 6'1", 240, with not a ton of length there. I know that everybody's arm lengths were messed up at the combine, so he measured in a little bit longer at his pro day. But I understand the vision for him as a player. I think, he's not exactly the same, but in terms of the physicality, but I see how you could use him like Dante Hightower, where he's playing off the ball some on early downs, and then on passing downs, you put him in the pass rush. But at the same time, I think that you're not seeing dominant at either spot. So I kind of feel like he's sort of a tweener in between those two positions. And I love Hightower as a player, but I'm just not sure he has the physicality that Hightower had, and he certainly doesn't have the size that Hightower had. But I can see a similar archetype in terms of what the vision and the usage and the role would be for the player. And then if they love the intangibles like everybody else, which is what it seems like is pushing people over the edge to putting him in this conversation, then I can sort of understand it. But I would be a little bit wary of that pick at 4. If they were picking 10, then I'd be all for getting Jalen Walker. But I just feel like if you're picking at 4, I don't want to have to project him into sort of a specialized role. I want to be this guy is a left tackle. This guy's a wide receiver. Even Mason Graham, he's a 3 technique, right? He's a defensive, lineman. We know what he's going to do. But Jalen Walker is sort of in that tweener mold, but I do like him a lot.
Yeah. All right. We are going to get into some more questions, a little bit more about Jalen Walker and defense. But first, quick word from our friends at Game Time. Be right back.
Patriots Daily is powered by Game Time, the best place to get tickets to all of your favorite events, not just sporting events, but concerts and shows as well. And they have their new feature called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. They filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have super deals, they have great deals, they have amazing deals, and they have them right in the app. You can customize your spot and find the best place to see all of your favorite teams play. They have the lowest price guaranteed as well, along with event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. And you can also see your seat view right from the app. Not all ticketing apps have that, but Game Time does. You can see the Celtics, you can see the Bruins, you can see anything that's going on at TD Garden right here in the Boston area. So make sure you use Game Time when you're buying your tickets. With the Game Time Picks feature, all-in pricing, seat views, and more, it is the best place to find tickets. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
Game time. And I would be remiss not to remind you all of our tiers list. This is for our premium members that we're doing over at Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel, doing a lot of film breakdowns and quality content for y'all. If you get the rookie, it's ad-free content, early access to videos, and 5% off our merch, plus some custom and very embarrassing emojis for Mike and myself. If you get all pro, you get the ad-free stuff, you get the early access and the emojis, but you get 10% off our merchandise, as well as the profile film reviews that I've been working on. Just wrapped one up on Jalen Walker, going to be releasing another on running backs very soon, and all of our draft profiles. And if you want GOAT status, if you want to be the Tom Brady of Patriots Press Pass, you get everything in rookie and all pro. You're also going to get custom segments, post-game film breakdowns, exclusive interviews, 20% off all merch, as well as the Discord chat room with myself and our other hosts, and live film reviews with the hosts, and our Friday AMAs. Those are always a great time. Had a lot of fun when we did that back on Friday. All right, Evan, back with the mailbag. Let's get to another question. We touched on Jalen Walker. Let's bring another one of these quality defensive players into the mix. Mason Graham. Who do you think of those two has more upside, and who would provide the most immediate impact? I think we have a pretty good idea of how you feel on Jalen Walker. Now, how do you feel about Mason Graham?
Yeah, Mason Graham's been another one that I've been reluctant to really buy into for the Patriots specifically, not necessarily as a player overall, but I just feel like how many more, three techniques really, can you have on one roster? Like if we assume that, Milton Williams and Keon White are here, which I think is safe. And then Christian Barmore, hopefully will be healthy and ready to go. You're putting Mason Graham into a rotation with three other guys at least. And that's not a spot when you're picking 4 overall that you want to take a rotational player. You need to take a player that's going to be playing every single down for you or close to it. So I love Mason Graham as a prospect. I think that, one of the things that stands out to me about him is his ability to leverage blocks. I think he's probably one of the best in the class at that, just getting underneath guys and really sticking to double teams, which I think is really impressive at his size to be able to, anchor and not give up any ground. Got great hands, violent hands. Some of those reps against that poor USC center just getting tossed out of the way by the arm over. Like I felt bad, like just watching Mason Graham swim that poor man, to oblivion. So he's a violent player. He's a really fun player to watch. I just don't love, the fit for the Patriots. Like what's the projection of him playing 70% of the snaps right now? I don't know. But if I had to say who has more upside, I'd probably go Jalen Walker just because of the versatility and the ways that he could kind of touch different, types of things with the defense. But I think Mason Graham right now is probably a cleaner prospect to project to the pros.
I agree on both fronts. That Mason Graham clip against the USC center, I posted on Twitter a few months ago, and people rushed to defend the center like, no, he's good. Like, it was just Mason Graham, I promise. Like, he's a good player. That's how you know. Because people were like, no, I promise. Like, that is just showing you how special Mason Graham is. Nothing. Is it Jonah Monheim? Is that who it was?
Yeah, Jonah Monheim. I actually just did all the centers the other day, and, he's fine. He has issues with that, though. Like, he's not the strongest guy on the interior, and he plays a little bit upright in his stance as well. So I think he's, someone on day 3 at center that if they took him in the 5th or 6th round as a developmental center, I could get that pick.
Actually, so I haven't really dug into the centers yet. Who should Patriots fans know? Like Drew Kendall feels like an obvious one, Boston College. Obviously Georgia, Jared Wilson. Are there any other guys that we should be have on our radars?
Yeah, so I did go through a couple of these guys the other day, and some of them are guys that are projected to move to center, right? So that makes it a little bit difficult, like a Joshua Gray or a Gray Zabel. Some people have as center, but the guy that I like the most, in like the 5th or 6th round range was Eli Cox from Kentucky, athletic player, 9.9 RAS at the combine. Very physical though, and can finish blocks. Like out of all these guys, Jake Majors, Monheim, I thought Cox finished the best, and I think that's what you want to see out of those interior offensive linemen is who can stack up the pancakes, who can get guys on the ground, that sort of thing. So I probably liked him the best out of that group. I love me some Willie Lumpkin, but I don't know if he's going to be draftable at that size. Like, I think that's going to be tough. But if I had to pick anybody from that range of the draft, I'd probably go with Cox from Kentucky. Kendall, I think, is going to be a pretty early pick, relatively speaking. I think he's probably going to be gone no later than like the end of the 5th round. I think at the beginning of the process, a lot of people had him as an end of the draft type of player, but he had a fantastic combine. He's a very good athlete on tape. Really is a pretty easy projection, I would say, at center, and obviously played a ton of center at Boston College and has got a ton of experience at that spot. So if they're going to draft Drew Kendall, I think it's going to have to be, no later than that first 5th round pick. They're going to have to jump on that.
I just took him in the 7th in my latest mock draft. So sorry to Drew Kendall. Apologies, good sir.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that too, but just looking at some of the other rankings, the Beast just came out, and Dane Brugler has like a 4th or a 5th round grade on him, and I think a lot of people, he's not a top 100 player in the draft, but are looking at him as an early day 3 pick just because it's so easy to see him starting at center, at the next level. Seth McLaughlin's another guy from Ohio State that everybody's really high on. He's coming off an injury, kind of like a Josh Simmons situation, so we'll see where he ends up going. Maybe you get him in the 4th instead of the 3rd because of the injury, something along those lines. But it's not a terribly deep center class, I wouldn't say. I think there's like 8 or 9 draftable centers, but there's some guys that I think you could project a starter.
I mean, bottom line, if there's not a BC Eagle or an Ohio State Buckeye, I think we riot. Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, Trapillo's a right tackle. So like that, I think, makes it a little bit difficult with him. Maybe he could be a swing tackle early and then eventually replace Morgan Moses at right tackle. But Kendall to me is just, fits a need, plug and play player, Boston College guy, makes a ton of sense.
I'm sold. I guess I just undersold him. All right. Nope, not that one. This one. All right. Jalen Knoll is one of my favorite prospects. Mine too, G. McJenkins, in this draft. How would he fit on this team with Pop? Become more of a vertical slot, or would he be played more like an Edelman?
So I've looked at him this entire time as a vertical slot. Like, I think he's a pure speed slot guy. The comparison I've used for Knoll is Tyler Lockett. That's the type of player that I see, someone that really wins down the field at the 2nd and 3rd level with great route running. I think one of the things that stands out to me that really gravitated me towards Knoll, but even before the combine, was how efficient he is at the top of the route, with his cuts. Like, that's a guy that's like 3 steps and out of the break. And that's exactly what you want to see, efficient mover at the top. And then he was really good at the Senior Bowl. I thought, he was one of the best receivers there in Mobile. And then we get to the combine and he tested even better than I ever could have expected him to test. So I feel like there's a little bit of concern about whether or not he can play on the outside at all. I think he might be a guy that's truly a slot only type of player, but at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a very good NFL player. I have him as a top 50 player in the draft. I think he's going to go early.
Yeah, I feel like if he was on the offense and Pop obviously remained a starter, I could see it being a little bit more of like a more vertical Edelman and Mendola kind of situation where you do have Knoll as the guy who's a Z, but he's never really posted outside. He's usually in motion or kind of inside the numbers. So he's got that 2-way release. But I agree, man. I loved him at the Senior Bowl. That's kind of when he first popped on my radar. And it gave similar to the Lad McConkey vibes where it's just like, all right, nobody can cover him. Yeah. Even the really good guys, it feels like maybe we should just take the hint and understand that's a very good player we're looking at. If the Patriots take Will Campbell, expecting him to play left tackle, they commit to protecting Drake May and draft a guard, hopefully Tate Ratledge, and center, hopefully Seth McLaughlin too. Now, obviously, we talked about center. I love the idea of taking a left tackle prospect and a potential guard. I took Donovan Jackson and Ozzie Trapillo to try to just see if I could address both sides in the mock I did today. Make sure to check that out on CLNSmedia.com. But what would you do? Would you really commit to beefing up the trenches, or are you trying to, show some faith in Layden Robinson, City So, and those guys?
I would love to add somebody to the left guard competition because I just like this guard class. Like, I just think it's a good guard class. I think there's a lot of good interior offensive linemen, especially when you project all the college tackles that might move inside at the next level. It adds even more depth. You know, you mentioned Donovan Jackson, but a guy that I really like is Wyatt Milam. You know, just put him at left guard and Will Campbell next to him, you know, at left tackle for the next like 10 years. And I'm set, you know, like we're set it and forget it. I like Tate Redledge, you know, on film, but he played a lot of right guard at Georgia. I don't know if, you know, maybe it's easy for him to switch over to left guard. I'm sure he could probably do it, but some of the left guard guys that, you know, I stuck with were, you know, kind of Wyatt Milam, you know, Dylan Fairchild, who's Rutledge's teammate at Georgia, who played left guard on Georgia's offensive line. You know, those types of players, I feel like project really nicely into that role, especially, you know, people like, you know, that you see the tackle to guard pipeline, you know, from the college to the pro game. And I think Milam is just going to fit right in there as one of those types of guys. So I would love to see that if they go that direction. I wouldn't necessarily say first and second round pick. I would maybe go first and third round picks, you know, with one of those third rounders somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I know Milam surprised me. I was watching Abdul Carter. I'm like, all right, West Virginia, it's his first game. I did not I thought Milam was kind of like a big guy where it wasn't necessarily going to be a great matchup for him, but it was like, nah, this dude is very patient and very physical. I like him a lot as well, too. All right, buddy. Last question for you. How could the Giants pass on Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, assuming they don't draft Shedeur Sanders? Now, of course, this is the situation we're all hoping for, that the Patriots can get one of those blue chip players. But do you think there's any chance on this earth that they actually end up with one of those guys? Or do you think we're just going to end up having to not necessarily settle, but, you know, accept our fate and take a Will Campbell or a Jalen Walker, one of those types?
I don't see the Giants passing on either of those players. I think, to me, the writing has been on the wall with the Giants since they signed Russell Wilson, that they have a plan at quarterback with Russell Wilson as a starter just for next year. And then they'll maybe revisit drafting a quarterback the year after. You know, maybe they still go out and get a Jalen Milroe or a Will Howard or, you know, one of those, you know, players on day 2 of the draft and take a shot at one of those developmental quarterbacks on day 2, but I'm just talking about, you know, early on in the draft. The team that I would look at if you're a Patriots fan that really wants them to still get one of Carter or Hunter would be obviously the Cleveland Browns. Like I just look at them and say, they're the Browns. Like, they do some things that are probably not the smartest thing in the world to do in the draft. And let's say we get to the point where the ownership gets involved and all that good stuff. Like, do they talk themselves into Shedeur Sanders? Like, they have a glaring need at quarterback? You know, Kirk Cousins might be an answer after the draft, maybe. But I would look at it and say, once you get into the draft and really get into the nitty gritty, do the Cleveland Browns reach on Shedeur, and then that pushes one of these two guys down? You know, it would probably be Carter, I would think. You know, I would think the Giants would go with Travis Hunter, but either way, you can't go wrong with those two. But I just I don't mean to throw shade at the Browns, but like maybe the Browns screw it up. Like, you know, like let's be honest, like, it's the Cleveland Browns and it's quarterback with the Cleveland Browns. Like, they have a history, so maybe they screw it up.
In the Haslams we trust, buddy. From your lips to the football god's ears. Appreciate you carving out the time, man. I know you're super busy this time of year, but before I let you go, please remind the people who, of course, have no idea where to find you and what good stuff you got coming down the pipeline we got to be looking out for.
Yeah, Patriots.com is obviously where you can find us. And I'll just tell you that next week, you know, during the draft, we have our annual draft show from the Patriots draft party at Gillette Stadium. So if you're a season ticket holder or you're invited to the party somehow and you want to come by and say hello, please do that. But we'll also be live the entire first round, and I believe the entire second round as well. So you can listen to us on the airwaves there, obviously from a Patriots perspective. So we'll keep it very Pats heavy, but we should have some special guests, which will be cool after they make the pick. So we're excited for that.
Awesome, buddy. Can't wait. Thank you for coming on. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you next time. Peace, y'all.